Hey developers, today we're going to look at something really cool. It's a brand new library called Petite Vue. It's an alternative to Vue. Let's see what it's all about. And during this video, I'm actually going to create this app. This is a iTunes search. So you can put whatever you want in it. Let's say Taylor Swift, and it'll bring up the album artwork, the name of the album, and then it'll link off to the actual page with information more about the actual album and iTunes. So this is using the iTunes API. I'm also using a little bit of Tailwind in here. So let's see how we can create this, and I'll explain everything about Petite and how you can get started. All right, so Petite Vue, you can see right here, is on GitHub. It was released, I don't know, probably a month or two ago as of this recording. So the idea is that it's an alternative distribution of Vue optimized for progressive enhancement. It provides some of the same template syntax and reactivity model, but it doesn't have everything in it. In other words, it has a lot of the features Vue has, but it's really small, 5 kilobytes, and doesn't have all the features, but this would be perfect if you want to take an existing app and add some reactivity to it, and you don't want to bring in a whole framework and use the CLI, or bring in Vue itself, which is much larger. So you can see here some of the examples. It says it's Vue compatible template syntax, it's DOM based, it's driven by Vue reactivity. Some people compare it to Astro, which is something I've never used, but I guess that's another really small reactive library. And if you look at the syntax right here, it does look really close to what you would use in a Vue app itself. And so yeah, I thought we could just kind of go through it and try this out and see how it goes, and see if we can create this at the end. Well, let's go ahead and open up our editor. And since this framework library is supposed to be used progressively enhanced, in other words, take an existing app, I'm just going to create a brand new HTML file and start from scratch. I'm not going to use any NPM packages. I'm not going to use any other frameworks. We're just going to create this all from scratch. So to do that, I am using VS Code. I'm going to do a new file, and I'm going to save it. And I'm going to save it as index.html. And now we are in our files. Since we're in a new file, I can go ahead and use some Emmet here and, I don't know, create some boilerplate. And the first thing we want to do is actually use the CDN version of it. And it even tells you here in the documentation that you can use the production CDN URLs, or you can use the ESM build URLs, but we're just going to use the one it recommends here right inside the script tag. So we're going to go like this. We're going to copy and paste it in here. I'm going to copy here. Cool, here's my script tag, and I'm actually going to use a Tailwind as well, just for some styling. So I'm going to copy and paste that from my other screen here. I'm going to add some basic styles. So I think that's it. Let's change our title here. I don't know, Petite Vue example. And also, I use this plugin called LiveServe. So if you go into the extensions here and look for Live Server, it's right here, and it allows you just to like really quickly take your HTML and creates like a mini server out of it. So we're going to use that for this project. So I'm just going to open up Live Server, and that'll open up on port 5500. So it's actually changing it to 5501 because I already have 5500 taken up, but see, there's nothing there. But if I do a hello world, let's do an H3, hello world. We got a real ugly hello world right there. So the first way you can use Petite Vue is actually use it with this CDN tag. So if you do it like that, then you should be able to just mount it right inside the DOM. So I'm going to create a div here, and I'm going to create a vscope, and this is something that tells it that, hey, these are going to be inside. This object is going to be available and be reactive inside this div block right here. And I'm going to have count, and I'm going to add a button, and here comes the Vue syntax. I can use @click, and I'm going to do count plus plus, and I'm going to call this, I don't know, increment. So if I did this right, it should show. Okay, so I have a button here. And just so I can see it's a button, I don't know, I can class background blue 300 rounded shadow. So this is a little bit of, there it is. There's my increment. And if I increment it, it's great. It's moving up as I expected. So right here, I already have A very simple example of using reactivity here. I have a number, it's incrementing, it's working. But obviously this isn't the greatest way to do things. You have to kind of create this big object here and put everything in it. You have to like inline it inside your HTML. So let's see a better example of maybe doing it with using the script type equal module, which I think is a little bit easier. So at the bottom of our body here, so I'm gonna go into here and I'm gonna comment out the script. I'm gonna create a new script tag here. And inside this script tag, it's gonna be a little different. I'm gonna do script type equals module. And now I'm going to import in, and since we're doing modules, we can actually do the syntax here. We're going to do create app from, and this is where we grab in the unpackage.com Petite Vue, and we'll do $module or question mark module, and that'll make it a module type syntax in here. And now to use this, we can actually, first way is we can just use create app here, and we can make an object and just put whatever kind of reactivity things we want in here. So the most easiest would be count, I suppose. And then we can even put increment in here. I guess I called it here. Yeah, I didn't even have a name of the method here, but I can create an increment. We can even make it we'll make it a function here, and we'll take this dot count plus plus, and then you can set to where you want to mount it in the DOM. So instead of using this vscope syntax, I'm going to just comment this out, and we're going to create a new div, and this time we are going to add an ID, and I'm going to call it example. And since it's a ID, we put the hash mark there, hash example, and now I should have the same sort of things I had in here. Let's see, and I don't have to put this vscope because it should have the scope in there. So I have a button, and now I can do this click handler. Instead of going to count, I should have access to increment, and let's see if it works the same way. And just to make sure I didn't mess something up, increment example 2 will be the name of it. And cool, so it's working the same way. If you look inside the console, there's no errors, so we know it's working as we expected. So this is a little bit more cleaner, but what happens if you wanted to create like components and reuse those components? So probably the better way to do this is to kind of refactor this one more time. So instead of having this create function right here, we're gonna create a function. So I'm going to call this example func. And now inside here, I can kind of put whatever I want. And I'll just return the object, just like I did before, but it's a little bit more reusable. So I can put my count here. And then once again, I have my increment, which, this dot count plus plus. And then inside my example function, where this create app is, I can just pass in this example function instead, and just to make, and actually, how about we do it, this example equals this got count plus 2. So maybe we'll do it by 2 this time. Okay, and actually we need to add right here, example func needs to be a function. So let's see if it works. I'll refresh it, got no errors. Cool, it's going up by 1. If I do 2 here, cool, it's going up by 2, so definitely still working. So you can even do something more difficult than this. Let's say we want, instead of doing this dot count plus 2, what happens if we wanted to like pass in a prop to it? So let's have a prop here, and this is gonna be a object, and we'll just say prop.count. So that'll set the initial amount. So what I could do here is in this example func, I can actually pass in the count and then what I want to start with. Maybe I want to start with 20. If I refresh it, now it starts at 20 instead of 0. So now I've basically created a prop that I can pass into this component, which is really cool. But what happens if right now you're kind of mounting it to one place as example, but what happens if you can actually also set the template inside here as well. So inside this return statement, I can set the template, and that way I don't have to mount it directly. So to do that, you use this $sign template, and then basically the same thing I had before. So I'll have example here. And then in here, I don't actually have to put anything in here. And if I refresh it, it still works the same way. And now I don't have to like declare the template in here. And in fact, so I have example here, so we can actually change this to a template. So if we change it to a template, refresh, now we actually have to do one other thing. Since it's now a template, we have to kind of call it somewhere. So we'd have to do a div here, and in this div, I'll do vscope, example func, and then we'll pass in the count 20 to it. And if we save it, oh, and we need one more change. We just have to change this example func. We're gonna send it, pass it as an object back over. And so I'm gonna take this out, so it passes it like this. And if I did this right, it should work. Cool, so now here's my increment, it's working. Now if I put in, I don't know, 25, starts at 25, and actually I can duplicate this too if I wanted to. So let's say I copy this a few times. Yep, here's 25, 27, and they're all individual numbers. Now you're probably thinking, well, how do I share information between these components? Well, you could like maybe figure out a way to like pass in the same prompts to each one of these. But one other kind of cool way is, since we're using Vue, we could actually use this thing called Reactive. So I'll show you. So we kind of put in Reactive here, and then I can create like a store basically. So I'm gonna create a store here. It's a reactive object, and we're just gonna put in count in the store. So it's available. And now I can use this store in my app. So I'm gonna have this example func. I'm gonna put store here instead. And then store has a count. It doesn't have an increment. So let's kind of refactor this. Let's add an increment here too. And this is just gonna do this dot count equals this dot count. I don't know, let's do +3 this time. And I'm gonna delete this out and this. So we're actually not gonna be passing it into the prop here. And now we have available to the example func and the store. But what we want to do here, so we'll delete these out. And this time we'll be using the example func, but we want to actually use the store. So inside here, this vscope, I have this count, but I'm going to put store.count and store.increment. So it's grabbing it out of the store instead. So if we refresh it, there we go. So now you can see here, I'm clicking here. It's actually using the store one that's shared between all three, because now we're using this store.count. And so we could kind of share this information. We could also have another variable inside here and then interact between the two. So some would be locally to this example function and some would be like globally. So you can kind of get an idea of how to do this. So I think since we understand all of this, let's go ahead and just try to create this iTunes app. Okay, so for the sake of time, I went ahead and just copy and pasted the HTML and CSS with the Tailwind in there. That way you don't have to spend watching me type in the CSS classes. But for example, we have a form here. We have an input with some shadows on it. We have a button that says submit. And then we have this right here, which will be our results. And we also have an href, so you can link to the actual pages. And we have a h3 and image tag here. So this is what it looks like. Obviously nothing's working because we don't have it configured correctly. So that's where we're gonna do this. I went ahead and commented all this rest of the stuff out. So what we need to do then is to create our app here. So I'm gonna create, there's a couple ways to do this. I'm gonna create this as a store. You could certainly create this as a function, but I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. But what happens if you wanted to reuse this on the page in different places? Maybe you had like a pop out from the right, or you had the top right hand corner as a search, and you just kind of wanted to share it. You can make this as a function too, but I just want to create this as reactive. So in this, we're going to have a couple of things. First, I'm going to have a search text, which I'm going to leave blank here. I'm going to have a results text, which I'm just going to leave blank. And then I'm going to have this search. I'm going to use it async. And the search is going to actually kind of get our search for us. So I'm going to call iTunes search. And we're going to use fetch because we're going to do this all client side. We're not using server at all. And I'm going to copy and paste this URL. A lot of people are asking me, I've done something similar, and people are like, I can never get the iTunes API working. It always gives me CORS errors. And that is true. It is a little tricky to use. But I will show you, I will paste this here. This is the iTunes URL that I'm using. And the thing that people miss is you have to put an entity type. If you leave the entity type out, you'll get a CORS error. So make sure you do that. And I'm going to make this like this. So we're basically grabbing the search text from here. And I'll leave a description. I'll leave a link to the code in the description as well. And what we want to do is we're going to wait for the results, which is going to be iTunes search.json. It should come back as JSON. I'm going to console log it because I've done this too many times now and had problems. And then if this all looks good, I have this results in our object here. I'm just going to assign it to the results, which is like a big array of stuff. And that's all I want to have here. So let's see if we can get this working here in our reactivity here. So we actually do still need to mount it. So let's see here. We're going to do, well, I'll just type it out. Create app. We're going to pass in the store. And we're mount it. I'm going to call this iTunes search. So should mount it. Now this store will have access in this iTunes search. So if I go back up to the top. Cool, here it is. So first, since we're using Vue, we have access to all the Vue directives that you know and love. So the von directive, the vbind. So we can do this. On submit, we're going to prevent, which by the way, the .prevent works as well. And we're going to go into store.search. By the way, here's the ID. So this is where we're kind of pulling in the code. And I have to spell search right. There it is. And then we have this button here, and we have this class for the submit. So we want to actually add a click handler. So when you, well, it should be caught by the submission of the form, but just in case, we'll just also put store.search here as well. And this is where we're going to put the results, but let's see if it at least works first. Oops, I actually forgot the £sign here. Let's try that again. Okay, I'm not gonna worry about that error right there, but I'm gonna do Taylor Swift. Cool, so I do see some results coming back. They are empty. So let's see here what happened with this network request. Oh, so it didn't get the term yet. So I have this .search text, but I really need it to work with the input. So I need to add in vmodel search text. So now it should be two-way data bound. Okay, let's see if we can search here. And we'll just do Taylor Swift. Cool, so we see that we got response back. And results here show everything that we want. Oh, by the way, if you do have any CORS errors here, one thing I also notice is that the response headers shows that the access control allow origin is this 5500. So you may have to play around with what ports might work correctly for you, and make sure that you're sending the correct headers over. Otherwise, things will not work correctly for you. So just keep that in mind if you have some problems with it. All right, so we are definitely receiving back a whole bunch of stuff, which is good. So let's see if we can actually get this inside our app so we can display it. So here's the results section, and like I said, I'm just using basic Tailwind with grid, CSS grid in here. So the first thing we want to do is where this big class is here, we're going to add in a v4. So it should be album in store.results. That's where we're going to get back. And it's always a good idea in Vue to add a key here. So we're going to do album.collection ID. And you kind of have to just kind of look through everything to see what all this is, by the way. And this href is supposed to be album.artist view URL, but if it's blank, we'll just have the pound there. And we're also, for this image, which is probably what everybody really wants, well, actually right here, we'll do collection name first. Will be album.collection name. And here, this source right here will be album.artwork URL 100. And keep in mind this colon right here, because we're binding it. That's the same thing as doing a v-bind. And same thing here with this href. We're v-binding this in here. And that way you don't have to do anything else. So let's see if that works. And refresh it. Let's put in Taylor Swift. Cool. So here we've gotten everything coming in, all the album artwork. Now, looking at the results, I couldn't find like higher quality images, and I kind of blew them up so they're a little bit fuzzy, but you might be able to find, I couldn't find anything really good. They only have these are more just thumbnails, so they have 60 by 60 and 100 by 100 as the different thumbnails. But you can also put in like the genre and the copyright and things like that, and the price if I wanted to. But once you click on any of these, then they'll actually go to the page if it's there. So in this case, should be like this. Let's try that. Taylor Swift. And let's look in our console. There we go. Yeah, so now it's working right. It's bringing up the right pages, opening them in a new tab, which is awesome. Cool, so I hope you guys learned something here. This wasn't too bad. I could also now, like this Reactive, if I wanted to, I could reuse it in other places. But tell me what you guys think below. And also, if you're interested in cool Vue things, check out these other videos. They'll be awesome for you. Thanks.